Good afternoon, and welcome to True Crime Mysteries. If you're new to the channel, hello and welcome, and if you're returning, welcome back. If you can give this video a like and comment with your thoughts down below, that would be much appreciated as it helps the channel to grow. And if you're not subscribed yet, go ahead and click that red button because I make more content like this, and hit the little bell icon so you get notified when I post because I'm bad at keeping a regular schedule. Today, we're discussing 3 episodes of CSI and the real-life crimes that inspired the show. Let's get into it. Number 1. Chante Jewan Mallard. In CSI Las Vegas Season 2, Episode 21, titled Anatomy of a Lie, we follow Grissom and Sarah unravel the mystery of a man that was found in a shallow grave in a park, covered in lye. They discovered that the man had been hit by a car, survived the collision, but had slowly bled out approximately 72 hours after the crash. The evidence led them to a young lawyer who had been driving under the influence and accidentally hit the man. The man became lodged in his car windshield, and he went home and hid the man in his garage while he sobered up. However, the man woke up, and the lawyer was concerned about how this would affect his career and let the man bleed out to death and then disposed of the body. Watching these old episodes back is great. This episode actually features a young Zachary Quinto in one of his first on-screen roles. This episode was based on the real-life murder of Gregory Biggs. On October 26, 2001, in Fort Worth, Texas, around 3 a.m., 25-year-old Chante Jewan Mallard was driving home from a nightclub. Mallard should not have been behind the wheel. At the party, she had been drinking heavily and partaking in both cannabis and ecstasy. Mallard was less than a mile away from home when she hit a man with her car. The collision was at such a high velocity that the man became embedded in her windshield. She stopped briefly and attempted to dislodge the man from her car. She knew at the time he was still alive. Chante was a trained nurse's aide, however, she also knew she was in no position to be behind the wheel, and she was at fault for the collision. Her self-preservation overtook this stranger's life. The man was Gregory Biggs, a 37-year-old man walking alongside the highway before he'd been struck. A series of unfortunate events had led to Gregory becoming homeless. Gregory had gotten into a new relationship and his new girlfriend had fallen on tough times. Gregory loaned her money to help her out. This led to him not making his truck payments, and his truck was required for him to do his work as a self-employed bricklayer. Gregory had his vehicle repossessed, and he lost his house when he was unable to work, making it so he also couldn't afford his medications. Gregory had schizophrenia and bipolar disorder and relied on his medication to help him live a balanced life. He had started new work as a bus driver and had been attempting to piece his life back together, but his mental health had made it a challenge for him to keep up with a routine. Shame and embarrassment for his situation led to Gregory losing touch with those closest to him. His son said that he lost touch with his father sometime around July 2001. Back on the highway, Chante gave up trying to get Gregory off of her car. When she finally gave up, she drove her Chevrolet Cavalier home, with Gregory still lodged in her windshield. She parked her car in her garage and left Gregory bleeding heavily, conscious, and begging for help. Over the next several hours, Chante continually checked in on Gregory to see if he had finally bled out. She said that she apologized to him, but never made any attempt to help him. After many hours, Gregory finally lost consciousness and eventually bled out. The next day, Chante enlisted her ex-boyfriend, Cleet Denal Jackson, to help dispose of the body. Mallard, Jackson, and another man waited until it was dark, then they took Gregory to a nearby park and dumped him there. They then attempted to destroy evidence from the crash by setting fire to the vehicle. On October 27th, Gregory's body was discovered in Cobb Park. An investigation into his murder began, but there was little evidence and little hope that the case would be solved. Hit and runs are very challenging cases. 4 months later, police got a call from a woman who said that she might have information regarding a hit-and-run victim. Miranda Danielle said that she'd been at a party when an acquaintance, Chante Mallard, had made some concerning statements to her. Danielle noted that Mallard had said, "I hit this white man," and had been laughing about the situation. It was a strong enough lead, and police decided to bring Mallard in for questioning. A search warrant was also issued to search Mallard's home for evidence. They located Mallard's car in the garage, which had significant damage to the hood and the front bumper. Additionally, it was also missing the windshield entirely, and they found the seats to the vehicle in the backyard that had extensive burn damage. Officers discovered a dried pool of blood soaked in the concrete floor of the garage. There was also significant blood evidence on the inside and outside of the vehicle. There was a lot of blood evidence in the garage, far more than anything other than homicide could explain. On February 26, 2002, Chante Mallard was arrested and charged initially with failing to stop and render aid. She was released on bond the same day. However, once officers got a report back from Gregory's autopsy, Mallard was arrested again on a murder charge as well as tampering with evidence. The 2 men that helped Mallard were also arrested and charged with tampering with evidence. They both pled guilty and received 10 years and agreed to testify against Mallard. Mallard pled guilty to tampering with evidence but pleaded not guilty to the murder charges. Her trial began in June of 2003. Mallard apologized to the court as well as directly to the Biggs family. She said that she had panicked and was afraid of getting arrested. Several experts testified that Gregory would have survived his injuries, but Mallard had shown a remarkable disregard for human life by concealing him until he bled out, a process that would have left him suffering for many hours. The jury took less than an hour to deliberate. Mallard was found guilty and sentenced to 50 years in prison for the murder charge and 10 years for tampering with evidence. Chante Mallard remains incarcerated and she will be eligible for parole in 2027. Number 2. Priscilla Joyce Ford. In Season 3, Episode 17 of CSI Vegas, we follow a case where a woman drives into a cafe. In the episode, she had multiple fatalities and several injured victims. The team worked to determine if the crash was an accident or intentional. In the show, the woman had died in the crash. This was a deviation from the actual case this episode was based on. It was based on an incident on Thanksgiving Day in 1980 when Priscilla Joyce Ford drove her car into a lineup of people waiting to get into a casino in Rio, Nevada. Ford had been drunk and had intentionally driven into the crowd at 40 miles per hour, resulting in her killing 6 and injuring 23 people. Officers quickly arrested her at the scene and said that she very calmly went into custody, only asking officers how many were dead. Ford explained that she was following the voices in her head. She had been diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia 10 years prior, which had ended her career as a teacher. She had a hard time sticking to a treatment plan for her mental illness and had sought treatment at 7 different hospitals but continued to be released without any follow-up. Ford had a 6-month-long trial, where the main conversation was determining whether Ford was fit to stand trial. The judge had ordered a mental health treatment plan and followed a mental health evaluation. He found that she was well enough to continue with the trial. Ford pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity. However, on March 12, 1982, after a 13-hour deliberation by the jury, Ford was found guilty of all 6 counts of murder and 23 counts of attempted murder. Ford was sentenced to death by gas chamber. Ford's lawyers had attempted several appeals, which were all denied. The legal proceedings delayed the sentence from being carried out for over 2 decades. Ford died in 2005 at the age of 75 in the Southern Nevada Women's Correctional Center of emphysema. Number 3. Kathleen Peterson. In Season 6, Episode 3 of CSI, dubbed Bite Me, It covers the story of a man whose wife fell down the stairs and died. The investigation called into question the validity of the husband's timeline and the circumstances of the evidence. This episode follows the real-life case involving the death of Kathleen Peterson that died on December 9, 2001. When I started researching this case, I realized I had heard about it before. I had watched the documentary The Staircase on Netflix a few years ago, which, to be honest, was one of the worst true crime docs I have ever watched, and I would not recommend. In Michael Peterson's retelling of the events that had occurred, he said that he and his wife Kathleen had been having a drink together at their pool. It was a rare night when all of their kids were out of the house. He said that they had dinner, watched a movie, and decided to continue chatting outside, as they often did. He said that they stayed up and chatted for a while, and then Kathleen said goodnight and went in for the night. But he said that he decided to stay in a little bit longer. He said that he had fallen asleep and woke up around 2:40 a.m. And when Michael went back inside, he found Kathleen at the foot of the stairs with blood everywhere. He called 911.
Durham 911, where's your emergency?
1810 Cedar Street, please.
What's wrong?
My wife had an accident. She's still breathing.
What kind of accident?
She's down the stairs. She's still breathing. Please come.
Is she conscious?
What?
Is she conscious?
No, she's not conscious.
Okay,
Please.
how many stairs did you
What?
fall down?
Huh?
How many stairs?
Stairs.
How many stairs? Calm down, sir. Calm down.
No, 15, 20, I don't know. Please, get somebody here right away, please.
Okay, somebody's dispatching the ambulance
No.
while I ask you questions.
It's in Forest Hills, okay? Please.
Michael claimed that Kathleen had fallen down the stairs, but nothing about the evidence supported a fall down the stairs. There was blood everywhere in a variety of spray patterns. Kathleen also had blood on the bottom of her feet, indicating that she had been standing at some point. Blood was also found all around the house, including blood on the front porch. Who were the Petersons? Kathleen was 48 and was a successful executive at Nortel Networks. She was an intelligent, strong, hardworking, and vivacious woman. Kathleen was involved in her community, serving on several boards for the arts. She was a supermom to her daughter Caitlin from her first marriage, as well as Michael's sons and the 2 girls that they adopted together. Their home was described as always filled with love, laughter, and trust. Kathleen seemed to excel at everything she did, from work, being a mother, and a wife. She had met Michael in 1986. Michael had just recently separated from his wife Patty and was in the process of relocating back to the United States after spending several years in Germany. Michael had served in the Vietnam War, but after a car accident had left him with a permanent disability, he was discharged from the military. While Michael and his first wife had been living in Germany, they befriended another couple, Elizabeth and George Ratliff. Elizabeth worked with Patty, and George was a captain in the Air Force serving in the Vietnam War. George had died on duty, and 2 years after, in 1985, Patty died as well. Her cause of death had been deemed by both German officials and the U.S. military police as an intracerebral hemorrhage caused by a pre-existing blood clotting disorder. In both George and Elizabeth's wills, they had listed Michael and Patty as the caretakers for their 2 daughters, Martha and Margaret. Less than a year after, Michael and Patty separated. Patty maintained custody of their 2 sons, Clayton and Todd, in Germany, and Michael took the Ratliff girls back to the U.S. with him. Kathleen and Michael merged their families a few years later, and they officially adopted Margaret and Martha together. Eventually, Clayton and Todd joined the family, and all the children lived in Durham, North Carolina. When Michael had moved back to the States, he began his career as a fiction novelist. He had a successful career writing several popular war-themed novels. However, he seemed to have played up his military career. He'd made a habit of implying that the injuries that resulted in him being discharged had occurred during active duty, when they had actually happened in Japan while he was on leave. He also claimed to have several war medals. He said that he'd received a Silver Star, a Bronze Star with Valor, and 2 Purple Hearts for his heroic efforts in the war. His military records showed that he had received a Silver Star and a Bronze Star, Although not precisely criminal behavior, it showed the actions he was willing to go to paint a narrative that fit with the story he wanted to tell. After Kathleen's death, Michael would go on to tell numerous people how drunk Kathleen had been that night. He said that they had consumed 2 bottles of wine that evening, and Kathleen had also taken a Valium pill for her insomnia. While her autopsy revealed that she had consumed alcohol that night, she hadn't even been over the legal limit to drive, indicating she had likely only had a glass or 2 that evening, not a whole bottle. Her autopsy also showed several severe injuries that were inconsistent with a fall down the stairs. She had several lacerations to the top and back of her head that appeared to be from blunt force trauma, according to the medical examiner. She also had a fracture in her thyroid neck cartilage as well as a significant amount of bruising. And based on her injuries, they estimated that she had died from the blood loss of her head injuries over a period of 1.5 hours to 2 hours. The medical examiner deemed her death a homicide, and a week later Michael Peterson was arrested and charged with the death of his wife. The defense team alleged that the evidence painted a different scene than Michael had depicted. Based on the blood evidence, they alleged that Michael had brutally beaten Kathleen and left her thinking she was dead. But at some point she regained consciousness, which explained the blood on the bottom of her feet. They alleged that Michael discovered Kathleen was conscious and walking, and he beat her again, leaving her to bleed out while he cleaned up the scene. Michael was barefoot when officers had arrived at the scene. His shoes and socks were covered in blood near Kathleen. A shoe print matching Michael's shoe was found on Kathleen's pants at the back of her knee, which investigators found odd because Kathleen was found face up, so there was no explanation for a perfect shoe print on the back of her pants. Michael also had blood splatter on the inside of the leg of his shorts, but nowhere else, which seemed odd. Michael's lawyer, David Rudolph, argued, "What our experts tell us happened is that at some point Kathleen fell backwards and hit her head. She lay bleeding, gets up, steps into a pool of blood, slips, hits her head again, and she bled out." In addition to the blood evidence, it was discovered that the couple had over $143,000 in credit card debt. The house was also a financial burden. The 14-bedroom mansion required immense upkeep. It needed a new roof, plumbing work, and they suspected a termite infestation in their living room. Kathleen had told her sister that she wanted to sell the home and downsize, but Mike didn't have any interest in moving. Kathleen's company Nortel was also experiencing financial issues that resulted in 45,000 employees being laid off, and Kathleen had suspected her job security was at risk as well. She had a $1.4 million life insurance policy through her employer, which she would lose if she were laid off, which indeed would have pointed to a motive for murder. Lastly, the piece of evidence that came to light cast significant doubt into the picture of a perfect marriage, painted by Michael. On his computer and in his emails were lengthy conversations that Michael had with an escort. It came to light that Michael was forced to address that he was bisexual and had been with men during his marriage to Kathleen, which he claimed she knew about and accepted. Michael Peterson's trial started in 2003. His trial lasted 3 months and he was ultimately found guilty, but years later it had been determined that there had been several issues during his original trial. A blood expert, Dwayne Deaver, testified on behalf of the prosecutor, outlining the bloodstain pattern analysis. He told the jury that he was a highly trained expert, testifying that he had participated in over 500 crime scene cases and was highly regarded as one of the leading experts in his field. It was believed that Deaver's testimony was what convinced the jury to find Michael Peterson guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. In 2010, it was found that Dwayne Deaver, who worked for the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation, had on numerous occasions misrepresented or withheld evidence to the court, as well as grossly falsifying his qualifications, and had far less experience than he led jurors to believe. This included evidence submitted to the courts in Michael Peterson's trial. It was found that several pieces of favorable evidence had been held from the defense, which had made the entire trial unfair. In 2011, Peterson was granted a new trial and released on bond while he awaited another trial. A new trial allowed his legal team to look at plea deals. In 2017, Michael Peterson accepted an Alford plea, where he made no admission of guilt, but acknowledged that there was enough evidence against him to convict. Peterson was 74 at the time and had already served 8 years in prison. He was sentenced to 86 months in jail, and because he'd already served 98 months, it was considered time served and he was released. To this day, there are still no definitive answers about what happened to Kathleen, and we will likely never know. Well, that is it for this video. As always, please give this video a thumbs up if you like the content and subscribe for more if you haven't already. If you've done all that and want to support me in the channel, we have channel membership as well as Patreon to get early access, members only content, and more. We also have merch and other goodies in the description box as well as links to all my socials. But until then, I will see you all in the next one. Bye for now.